Let's talk.
John Brown.
The Fourth's Fatal Legacy, the Restoration and the Ruin of the Courtenays is a fascinating new book by Hazel Pierce about one of the most overlooked families of the early modern period. This family played a critical and crucial role, and their story of love and loss, loyalty and betrayal, makes Game of Thrones look like, an episode of the Teletubbies. I'm delighted to say that the one person to put this together is Hazel Pierce, and I'd like to say that Hazel joins us not from some bleak tower overlooking the northern escarpments, but from somewhere probably warm and cosy. Hazel, good morning to you. Good morning, Hazel. Are you there, Hazel? Are you receiving me?
I am, loud and clear.
Marvellous. Now then, let's set the scene then. First of all, why are you so eminently qualified to write about this overlooked family, indeed this overlooked period of English history?
Well, it first came to my attention when I was doing my research on Margaret Pole, and Margaret was the cousin of Catherine Courtenay.
Yeah.
So they weren't the major part of that book, but they were fascinating, and I just feel that they've been overlooked, and they were such a key part of that period.
So set the scene for me. So because what period are we talking here? It's like we're talking the middle to late 15th century. Is this pre-Tudor? Are the Plantagenets shuffled off? Are the Tudors in full swing? To explain where we are.
Yeah, we're just as the Plantagenets about to shuffle off, because Catherine was the niece of Richard III.
Right.
And then after Richard III was killed and Henry VII succeeded, Catherine's sister married Henry VII, so she was a sister-in-law to Henry VII and the aunt of Henry VIII. And so the story takes us right through into the reign of Henry VIII, and through to the reign of his daughter, Queen Mary I.
Otherwise known as Bloody Mary to the rest, to those. Right.
That's right. Yeah.
One of the things because if you say name me some Tudors, and name me some wars, people go Richard III, right? Fine, because we all know that bit, and then Henry VIII because hurrah. But there is this fascinating period, isn't there, of kings and possibly queens who have been overlooked, and yet in the meantime there are these families that we don't that are the not so much kingmakers, but they are pretty much the movers and shakers, aren't they?
Yes, yeah. I mean, Henry Courtenay, Catherine's son, was brought up with Henry VIII, since he was a child, and he was with him, always. He was at court. He had other residences that he could have stayed in, but he tended to stay mostly at court, always in the king's presence. And I think that, when we talk about people executed by Henry VIII, Thomas More comes to mind, Anne Boleyn, obviously, but not Henry Courtenay. And yet he was the closest thing to a brother Henry VIII had. So, his execution, his fall was just as shocking as Anne Boleyn's and Thomas More's.
I mean, is this perhaps a case of it is an indicator of how unstable and paranoid that Henry? Because people think Henry VIII. Oh yes, we have that sort of. If you were a schoolboy in the early 70s, you had that whole thing about him, it all being merry old England, etc. And we don't actually get to see the dissolution of the monasteries, the capture of land, the psychotic behaviour that he has. I mean, Anne Boleyn, if you research the Anne Boleyn story, and then the death of More, and More's final words to Henry are mercy, 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 and he still has absolutely no mercy for one of his closest confidants. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, at the start of the reign, it was like wonderful. And if you look at sort of like the jousts that took place then, or the wedding celebrations for Henry Courtenay and Gertrude, and you think those people involved in those jousts, how many of them would then be executed, by Henry VIII? Nicholas Carew was at the joust, he was executed by Henry VIII. Henry Norris, he was executed by Henry VIII. And it is shocking. And also, the fact that Henry VIII used his daughter against Catherine of Aragon to try and get her to agree to the annulment of their marriage. He actually threatened Catherine and Mary with the most extreme penalties of the law. He was going to deal with them in Parliament, and he didn't care if he lost his crown. He was really, by that stage, he was from the man that came to the throne, and the man he became is so different.
So with the Courtenays, where are they from? I mean, what? Because you've got to have land, haven't you? Basically, that's one of the big issues in this time. So where are the Courtenays' power base?
So Devon, the West Country. So Catherine married William Courtenay, who was a son of the Earl of Devon, and that's how she became Countess of Devon eventually. Yeah, so they're a hugely powerful family down there. And
are the families sort of, because I mean Northumberland is also another sort of powerhouse, isn't it, at this time? So how are relations with? Because there are always. I mean, we come out of the War of the Roses, for goodness sake, not less than 100 years before, and that is just. Betrayal, counter-betrayal, plot twist, people people rocking up to a battle and going, oh, they look like they're winning, I think we'll all pile in now, boys. It is that labyrinthine. And then to try to explain it to the layperson, and I'm that worst sort of creature, an armchair historian, Hazel, and I give up at the Wars of the Roses and go, I'll just sort it out and come back and don't mention the princes in the tower. So how do you untangle the Courtenays and the plots and everything like that then?
I mean, until sort of the annulment question came, there wasn't much factionalism. That they got on well with other nobles, maybe not close to some, but were to others. Henry Courtenay was kind of, I wouldn't say laid back, but he wasn't. He wasn't like the Duke of Norfolk. He wasn't constantly pushing himself forward. He didn't have to. He was a member of the blood royal. He was the king's cousin. He was the only the grandson of Edward IV, apart from Henry VIII, and immensely wealthy. And he just enjoyed his life at court. So there wasn't a huge power struggle there, but there was that animosity with Cromwell.
Yeah. Okay.
Which was dangerous.
And so how important, because if you're the male of the line, you're either raising an army, you are heading towards an execution, or you are in exile, normally in France. So one of the great, thankfully we're rediscovering a bit the power of women, and they're not all sitting there sort of not knitting, doing needlework in the background. So Hazel, you must have discovered some pretty formidable sort of late Plantagenet, early Tudor matriarchs in there.
Yeah, well, Catherine is one of those. I mean, when her husband died, so then she was in charge of the estates of the earldom of Devon until her death. So even when her son came of age, she still held those lands. So she's basically like a custodian for him, and she was just excellent at it. She wasn't fazed by it. She wasn't unfair, but she could be forceful if she needed to be. And so she just took it in her stride. And when the estate was passed to him on her death, it was in, really good order. So she was really formidable, but so was her daughter-in-law, Gertrude, as well, because she was at the centre of this group that were trying to protect Catherine and Mary when Henry was moving against them, and at great risk to themselves, actually.
Isn't Gertrude the only one who survives out of the group because they betrayed, or is it just they get picked off one by one? And because again, this is incredibly dangerous stuff, because this is all happening within court, and court is very small. And we kind of know what happens if you, again, let's go back to that Game of Thrones analogy. If you get it wrong, you die, basically.
Yes. Yeah. So, Henry Courtenay was at court the whole time, and he was in the Privy Chamber, he was at the council, so the information that he got was highly sensitive and confidential, but he would pass it on to Gertrude. And so if it affected or threatened Catherine and Mary, then she would inform the Imperial Ambassador, who was the representative, really, of a hostile state, because he was the ambassador of Charles V, who was Catherine's nephew, and would be opposed and was opposed to the annulment. So, and Henry VIII and Cromwell knew there were leaks from the council meetings, and they made these veiled, they were giving veiled threats to Courtenay, quite a few times, that they knew this was happening. They didn't know for sure it was him, but because he was so close to Lord Montague, and Lord Montague's brother was overseas, Reginald Pole. Yeah. And he was also opposing the annulment. You could see why they would be suspicious. But because he told Gertrude, who was at a distance, she had the time, she wasn't in attendance at court, so she could write to Chapuis. She even visited him on occasion.
And Charles V, presumably, Holy Roman Empire. Are we talking that?
Yeah.
Charles V? Yeah. So
Yeah. That's him, yeah.
that's a formidable power base for Henry to come up against.
Yes, yeah. I mean, he was hugely powerful and influential. The Pope. That's why the Pope, he was in a difficult position, because if he agreed to Henry's request for an annulment, it's going to offend Charles V, and that's not good for the Pope.
And it's also going to upset the Spanish exchequer as well as all the Palatinate as well. So, there you go. It moves swiftly against her, but she managed to, she spends a considerable amount of period in time. And also the thing you've got to look out for is your offspring as well. So there's a child, isn't there? There's the young Edward. Yeah.
So, it's really tragic for him, because he was arrested along with his parents, and he was only 12. Yeah. And then he was imprisoned in the Tower, and then he stayed there, until he was in his late 20s. And, he was completely innocent. There's no question he hadn't done anything wrong. So it was very unfair for him. And she's
released, but he isn't until Mary the First, referred to by revisionists as Bloody Mary. And we could go off about that, because I think Mary the First is one of the most misunderstood, female monarchs, because she's been painted by a variety, including those damn Victorians. How, and the awful thing about Edward, isn't it? Is he in line to get married into families, but then there's a horrible tragic plot twist.
Yeah, so when he was released, a lot of those around Mary believed that, they all believed that because you've got a new situation here, you've got a queen. Yeah. Hadn't happened before, but they still thought that, she's got to marry and produce an heir. Yeah. So the man she marries has to be of a commensurate rank. Yeah. They were against a foreign match because they were afraid of, foreign domination. So the most eligible bachelor in England at that time was Edward, because he was descended from Edward IV and of the blood royal. Yeah. So, some people have thought, there was never a chance he'd marry her. But actually, those around her who knew her really well believed that he would marry her. And that's what he started to believe, obviously, when he was released. But going back to Mary being misunderstood, it's quite ironic, because of all the people around Edward, I think she was the most understanding of him, because when he was released, she appointed like a mentor to help him integrate back into the outside world. Yeah. And because she would have understood what he'd been through. She'd been persecuted as well. She was innocent. She'd gone through the same thing. So she knew what it was like. And she was very patient with him. She didn't punish him when he threatened to attack Geoffrey Pole, which is Lord Montague's brother, who'd been involved in the fall of the family. It was quite sad in a way. But she was very understanding of him and generous to him and his mother. But if you think about it, because both she and Elizabeth, the future Elizabeth I, have been declared, quote unquote, and listeners cover here, as bastards by Henry VIII, because he's such a great guy, so that he can get this line, and so they have had lived under the shadow of incarceration and also excommunication, and if you like, execution, of course. Yeah. Yes, yeah. So she was understanding of what he'd been through, and she realised that, what he'd been through was the result of his parents' loyalty to her and her mother. So she did feel that they were owed something, an owed recompense. What are you hoping? Because this is a book that you read at a pace, isn't it? Because it's not a flick through. You have to dig deep. How do you get the information on this family that's been overlooked, but B, arrange it in such a way that people don't go, who was what doing where and whatever, and I lost you somewhere near Northumberland, sort of thing. Yeah, it's quite difficult. Because there are so many people involved. But I try to focus more, especially with the annulments, rather than focusing on the movement of statutes through Parliament and how it progresses, to focus on the people themselves and how they reacted, the stress they were under. Because, it shows them in a way that you wouldn't see them otherwise. And that, to me, is more interesting than, because the process of how the annulment and the break with Rome went through is quite well known. Also, sorry. Yeah, no, after you. Sorry. No, I was just saying. Also, I I'm quite sad, really. I like looking through privy purse expenses and household accounts. So I spent a lot of time looking at the household accounts of Catherine Courtney.
Yeah.
Which quite badly mutilated and faded in parts, but you can still read quite a lot of it. And I found that really fascinating because it's like seeing her shopping list, if you like. It's digging into her everyday life, and that was just brilliant.
But that's the thing, Hazel, isn't it? Because we tend to think of, and like people will say to me, why do you like history so much? It's all, robber barons doing terrible things to each other. And I'm like, no, that's the Mel Gibson role. But they are real people. They have real concerns. They want to look after their children. They are okay. It's a different mindset. I mean, we thank goodness we don't have to put ourselves in a Plantagenet mindset or a Tudor mindset and get our kids married at 12. But you see what I'm saying? They are still human beings, and perhaps it's one of the great what ifs. If he'd married Mary and they'd had an heir, we wouldn't have had half the problem we had with Spain at the time, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
It is really sort of looking back and think what might have happened.
Yeah.
And also, I suppose, Elizabeth seeing what happened in Mary's reign was a sort of instruction for her when she came to the throne. Because she saw what went wrong for Mary, so she had a bit of a blueprint there. Yeah,
the big one is don't have an heir, basically. But unfortunately, and then we get into Stuarts, and that's even more fun. Hazel, what are you hoping that people will take? I mean, it's just, in the whole tapestry of English history, a period that's forgotten perhaps by a lot of people. This is another piece of the jigsaw, another fascinating bit of the mosaic that makes up this sort of early modern time.
Yeah, it's just, I suppose, to see with Catherine that she didn't retire to Devon and went off the scene. That, her role there was really crucial in running the estates and building networks there, and to appreciate what Henry and Gertrude lost, because they had everything. They were in the most privileged position you could imagine, and they could have kept everything if they just said, yes, Henry, but they didn't. And you have to admire them for that. And also Edward, in history, he's been dismissed as an idiot and a petulant, ambitious wastrel. And there's far more to him than that. And so I hope people, get to see a bit more, gain a bit more of an understanding into his character and what he went through. I'm
just blaming the Victorians. I mean, anything to do with this period, I just blame the Victorians and their revisionist history. But also, Hazel, another thing is to underline front and centre the importance of women in this. I mean, throughout history anyway, but especially now, because rather than being sent off to a nunnery if they get things wrong or whatever, at this period, as we see, the psychopath that is Henry VIII doing, they run a very real risk of being executed, mutilated, whatever. Yeah.
I mean, he executed his wife, two wives. So that's unprecedented. So, yes, they were in as great a danger.
The book is called Edward IV's Fatal Legacy, The Restoration and Ruin of the Courtenays. It is by Hazel Pierce, who we're speaking to today. Listeners, if you go onto our virtual bookstore, you'll see a rather splendid, I like a bit of gold and gilt on my front covers. You'll see a rather splendid front cover with Henry VIII lurking in the background. But, Hazel, if people want to follow you online, do you have a social media account? Is there a website? Where can people find you?
Yeah. I've got a website, The History House.
The History House. Wonderful. This book is called thehistoryhouse.com or historyhouse.co.uk or one of them.
I can't remember.
Just put it
the
in
History House. Or you can find me via the AGRA Association of Genealogists and Researchers and Archives directory as well, via their website.
Blimey, the way you rolled that off your tongue was very impressive indeed. Listeners, go and order the book from our own virtual bookstore. The book is called Edward IV's Fatal Legacy. It's by Hazel Pierce. Hazel, we got there in the end. It was an absolute pleasure to speak to you this morning.
You too, Giles. Thanks very much.